Welcome to the Young Adult Podcast. Welcome back to the Free Chapel Young Adult Podcast. We are so grateful that you are tuning in today. If I have not met you, my name is Skylar. I'm joined by two of our incredible young adult pastors, Pastor Aaron, our global young adult pastor, as well as our Gainesville young adult pastor.
Wait, am I allowed to do that to myself?
Yeah,
why not?
I think that's good self-confidence. And then we got Jordan Ball, who is our Midtown young adult pastor. Shout out to him. And we're going to have some really good conversation today. But before we get into our conversation, we always want to honor our incredible pastors, Pastor Jentezen and Jentezen Franklin. We love you guys so much. Thank you for creating this space for us to do what we do as YA. But as you know, we are in our Built Different series still. Yes. So some of you guys actually sent in some questions, and we want to answer one of them before we get into our topic. We have a really, really good topic today, but we're going to answer one question. And again, I said this in the last podcast. We're going to have a speed round. Yeah. Pastors. So I'll keep it
speed round's hard for pastors.
Let's say
2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes.
Let's say, I almost want to say 1 minute per person.
Dang.
Let's say, let's just say 1-ish minute.
Okay. My intro is like a minute and a half.
1-ish minute. So I'm going to propose the question to you guys. I'm going to read it from my phone so I say it the right way. But how do we love others like Jesus while still maintaining personal boundaries? And I'm going to elaborate a little bit, give you a little time to cook. Yeah. But I know when we think of loving people like Jesus, Jesus was always with people. He was always serving others. He was always out and about. And sometimes we feel the need to do that, as we should follow Jesus. But sometimes it gets to be a lot sometimes. We overload our plate and we need to establish some boundaries. So how would you guys advise a young adult to love like Jesus, but also still maintain boundaries?
Perfect story. Jesus sends the disciples on the boat. It's the famous story of Peter walking on water. And he's like, you guys go ahead of me. He's burnt out because he's been doing so much ministry. Now, Jesus knows there's a storm coming. He knows they're about to get in the middle of it, and yet he still sends them while he stays behind and prays. He is letting people know that it is okay to tend to yourself, to tend to your relationship with God, and to get healthy again. If you are in a constant flow of trying to be the hero for somebody, trying to take care of everybody, but you're getting burnt out and you're burning yourself out, that's not healthy. And that's why Jesus says to love your neighbor, but also to love yourself. So I would say it's totally fine to take a day off, to not go hang out with people all the time, to take time to recoup, to talk with God again, but just to take a day off. Or what I do is I go golf, you know, and I'm sitting there in creeks just trying to find my ball, but getting frustrated. But I'm loving myself, taking care of myself. So if Jesus can get away and allow somebody to still go through a storm, then guess what? I have the right to go ahead and get pulled away. And I'll say this as I close out my 1 minute. He knew the storm was coming, and he didn't right away go after them. So it's okay if somebody's in a storm, because I can guarantee you as a pastor, everybody's going through a storm. It is not selfish of me to not be in everybody's storm at every single moment. So.
Yes, that's very good.
When I think of love and boundaries, I think of Jesus in the context of denying oneself. And one of the greatest things that we can do in this idea of denying oneself is denying oneself in the context of thinking about the other person. So I may not want to tell you the truth, but I'm going to love you and deny me not wanting to offend you to tell you the truth. You see how that's spun? Even down to one time I was talking to a young adult, and we were just having an accountability. And they were like, man, I just felt like I had to sleep with my girlfriend to show her that I love her. And I said to them, one of the greatest ways you can love her is by denying what you want to love her and cherish her. The most sacred thing that you can cherish on a woman, which is her, area and part. And it's we get love twisted and think love is just action. But sometimes that action isn't sort of doing something, it's not doing something. It's the self-control. Because think about Galatians 5 when, Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit. What's on the front end and what's on the back end? Front of it, I lead with love and I apply it through self-control. So I think one of the things we can do is deny that ties into boundaries. I'm going to deny this to make sure I'm loving you and that you're comfortable.
That's real good. Good job, guys.
Was
that was pretty
minute?
quick. No, you went over, but it's okay. It's okay. I personally am very excited about this topic. We're kind of in that era. It's time. Voting is right around the corner. Politics are getting talked about. A lot of us as young adults, this is one of the first times we're the age group that is getting talked to a lot. Like, step up, go out and vote. Don't just be a Christian who believes all these things but put into action by voting. So we're going to have a conversation here as a YA family
So don't
about
tune on
politics.
because they hear politics, they're like, yeah, I ain't for this.
No, but we're going to be real, y'all.
Yeah.
We're going to
Lock
get
in.
into all of it.
Lock in.
So I'm going to just throw out this question. First question. It's kind of a little bit of a two-part, but one, I would say, why are we talking about politics in church? And second, how important are politics as a believer? So whichever, you can answer that in whatever order, but why are politics important? Why are we talking about it in church?
Well, first off, politics deals with people.
Yeah.
So like it'll affect people.
Yeah.
So anything that affects people, we probably have to talk about it.
Very
Now,
good.
yet again, there's a lot of gray area
Yeah.
into that conversation, but I think the reason why we talk about it is because it deals with people, and anything that affects a person, we want to make
Yes.
sure we have conversation around it.
Yeah.
But I meant piggybacking on that, like, I think what we have done in the context of Christianity is, and we were talking about this some time ago, about like sticking to the four walls of church. And that, the Bible says for us to go out to the nations, to go out to the world and minister the gospel.
Yeah.
But I can't do that if I'm in my comfort bubble of just, oh no, we're just going to stay here and worship together. No, we need to go out and, encourage people and preach the gospel, because every area of life and culture needs the gospel.
Yes.
It needs Jesus,
Yeah.
especially in the realm of politics.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that, especially young adults, are socially aware.
Yes.
I can't make an impact and I can't pray and I can't disciple if I'm not socially aware. And I just tie that to Paul when he was speaking to Athens. Like, he studied the culture. He studied their politics, their philosophy. He studied it so that way he can minister effectively through a lens of understanding.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for young adults to be able to minister properly to your college campus, to your friend group, to even your family. You have to be aware of the culture in the world you're trying to bring the gospel to.
That's very good. And I love what you both are saying, but Jordan, specifically when you said that politics affect people.
Yeah,
like, we can
absolutely.
either ignore this huge thing that affects all of us in church and let the world completely define it, or we can bring Jesus into it and then have a biblical perspective on literally everything.
Yeah.
It's funny because in life, we know we need to have a biblical worldview on all these other things. When it comes to politics, we
It's
start getting
like-
offended. We're like, why is pastor talking about this and that? But we want to have a completely well-rounded biblical worldview, not just about the stuff we're comfortable talking about, but about the stuff that affects all of us.
And it is uncomfortable to talk
Yeah.
about these things, because a lot of times when it comes to the topic of politics, some of the subjects around it affect, like, we have like
Yeah.
family members, or we come from a certain place
Yeah.
that you didn't talk about that. So it's like, that's why we got to deal with
Yes.
us,
Yeah.
so that we can deal with this stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
And not allow how we grew up and stuff like that to affect our view of the Lord and the Word of God.
Yeah.
So,
And I think people get really tense as soon as that word gets brought up.
Yes.
So like, as soon as like you be somewhere with anybody and then
Yeah.
somebody brings up like something political and you're like,
Yes.
oh no, it's about to go down.
Yes.
But the reason is because people get so combative. Like, people just want to fight over it. And it's like,
Defensive.
what if we decided to start the conference? Because in my opinion, Christians should be the ones who start everything,
Yeah.
should push it. So I'm not saying like, hey, do this, that. I'm saying like, what if you enter conversation with humility to like understand, hear somebody out, listen to what they're saying? Because I'm telling you, like, the more combative we are, the more we're going to push people away when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
And I just, for me personally, I would love to be able, because like you said, reach in every space. Like, that political realm is not one that's probably like effectively reached.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that our church is trying to reach more and more people, but like, just understanding, bro, like this is going to deal with people. So,
Yeah, that's so good. All right, next question. I have a little funny story to set up. But first I'll say the question and then I'll tell my story. But what is a healthy perspective to have when it comes to politics? So I'll give you guys that. You can think on it.
All right.
So this is a funny story. I've never shared this story publicly ever. So you are getting some exclusive stuff. So from, when was I? I think I was in third grade. It's 2008.
wow, you going back.
Yeah, 2008. This is a political story though. 2008. I was going to school in the hood. Shout out to the hood. I was going to school, and it was election time. And I remember we had. I'm not talking anything specific about these candidates. This is just literally a part of the story. So we had Barack Obama, little like cutout heads, and John McCain cutout heads, and we're in the hood. So obviously, all the little kids want the little Barack Obama heads to like hold up, like, yay! We know nothing about policies or anything like that. We're just going based off, he seems like a cool guy. So everyone gets these Barack Obama heads. And I remember all the Barack Obama heads were taken. So I had a John McCain head. And they're like, why do you have that? Like, and it's...
That's all that was left. That's all
Out
that
of
was
all
left,
the
man.
people that have a John McCain
That's all that
head,
was left.
it's Skylar.
Yeah.
I wanted a Barack head,
That's
though. No hate, no shade to John McCain. Anyway, again, we're not talking about the policies. We're just talking about the story. But anyway, I remember as kids, we literally just used, I say all this to say, we used to go based on, like, our perspective was, who seems like a nice guy? Right. Who seems like the cool one? Who seems like the one that the media is highlighting in the more positive perspective? But for us as believers, what is a healthy perspective to view when it comes to politics?
Hey, not make politics or the political parties your identity.
Yeah.
And I think we've done that.
Yeah.
And it's just based on how we were raised.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about this before. You know, I grew up in the hood, you know what I mean? East side of Buffalo, New York. So like in my neighborhood, it was like Democrat.
Yeah, very liberal.
Very liberal, very open, you know, Democrats, if you ain't Democrat, you ain't black kind of deal. But that was the tone.
Yes.
And when you grow up in an environment to where all you know is what you know, that's what you're going to stick to. It's the same thing on like people who grew up in a certain way, you know, who were around the Republic, but it becomes an identity.
Yes.
To where now if we are even have a conversation and let's say hypothetically, I'm not saying I'm one or the other.
Right.
But let's say I'm Democrat and you're Republican. If we're just having a conversation and we get on the topic of politics, it's like now it's gang wars.
Yes.
You know, you blood, I'm Crip. It's like, what you talking? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Blood, you know. And it's
They're
just,
much smaller than you, so I'd run away. Yeah.
but to answer the question, we can't make a party our identity.
Yes, that's very good.
Yeah, and I'd say also too as well, like stop trying to make an enemy.
Very good.
Like, so as soon as it happens every 4 years, as soon as we start going down this route, one side's like, they're my enemy. And the other side's like, that's my enemy. But Jesus said, pray for your enemies.
Yes.
So even if you're a Christian and that person you don't agree with, that person, don't let that person become your enemy. And if it starts going down that route that person's becoming your enemy, you need to pray for them. And I hope and pray that one day we could see, like in our offices, legitimately different people in office praying for each other.
Yeah.
Because everything starts at the top. Now, not everybody in leadership is a Christian. Not everybody in politics is a Christian. So I understand that. And people want to have different type of people in office. But at the same time, like, don't let that person become your enemy.
Yes.
Like, really seek your heart out. Because like you were saying, man, like if we disagree, you just watch like the tension start to happen in the room. But like, the one thing that I don't like is like, as soon as we start a conversation about politics, it's like, I'm going to find my point to get you and prove you wrong.
Yes.
Or tell you how sinful. And another thing is, let's be careful with language.
Yeah.
Like, just because we disagree on political parties or policies and all that, we can't use language that if you're a Democrat, you're not a Christian.
Yeah.
I think that's dangerous language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, because we got to understand politics are layered.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes people only know what they know, and we can't dismiss people's experiences.
Yeah.
So, more or less of judging you based on you thinking different or voting different, I just want to understand.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? I'll tell this, like a couple weeks ago, I went to go visit my granny. She's 94. Shout out to Granny. And she's like,
She's definitely watching this.
She's
Yeah.
definitely watching.
Definitely.
Granny, if you're watching this, she don't have her phone is a flip phone.
That's
so.
good. That's good.
But she was like, honey, I need to go vote. And I want to vote for that Kamala Harris lady, because we need a black, woman as president. I could easily be like, Granny, what you talking about? You ain't my granny. I don't love you.
Right.
But that's silly.
No.
Like, that woman, 94 years old, I may disagree, but I'm not going to now fight with my 94-year-old granny because, but I have context, the way she grew up, like her thought process, like how she views our culture. Like, I have to consider that. And if anything, just be in prayer that, man, God shows her what he needs to show her to help her be guided in whatever he wants to guide
And even
her.
in conversation we have, words might trigger you that might not trigger me.
Yeah.
So as soon as like one word gets brought up, like immediately in somebody's head, like it gets triggered. So they get combative and defensive.
Yes.
So like my wife's an immigrant. So if the word immigrant comes up, it's like, there's an alarm that kind of goes off.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm just viewing them as like they're wrong and not understanding it yet again what's happening in their heart,
Exactly.
then we're going to have a bad conversation, which is why I love, like, Jesus has the Pharisees come up to him. It's like, hey, pay taxes. Like who should we pay taxes to? And he's like, starts getting in this. That's a political thing that they're trying to bring to him. And it's a gotcha moment. And Jesus like looks at it, and on the coin, it has Caesar's face, right? Caesar's like the king of Rome, right? And Jesus is the king of the world. But like, they're trying to ask him a political question. And he goes, whose face is on the coin? He goes, Caesar. Give the Caesars what's Caesar's, but give to God what's God's. Well, what's God?
Yeah.
Me and you.
Yeah.
So when we have a conversation, I got to realize, like, you're a child of God. And I just wonder if sometimes we could go in conversation realizing, like, I'm not talking to a Republican. I'm not talking to a Democrat. I'm talking to a child.
But let me there's a term that, and this is, I'm glad we're having this conversation just to more or less educate people, but it's called political abstraction. It's a term, write that down, political abstraction. And what that term is they use this in politics to now take away your humanity. If in this debate or this running of office, I can now dehumanize you into, you're not, and I'm just using this as an example, you're not Kamala Harris, you're not a Donald Trump, you are this bad orange person, or you're this woman with no kids. Like, if I can now abstract you from your humanity, it's easy for people to dislike. And that's what they try to do, but we can't dismiss people's humanity. Because as it's happening in the political realm, it's filtering down to the community to where you're not Jordan, you're not Skylar, you're not whoever. You're this political party that I don't like because of A, B, and C. So you're not a human. And that's so dangerous. So please be mindful and stay away from political abstraction.
And something that we talked about this, we touched on this in the last podcast, but to bring it to politics, I love, again, what Jesus says is we as his people will be known by the way we love. So it's funny that we can forsake our love for the just being right politically, or we can lay our love down to back up a candidate or back up a party. But we need to remember, as believers, we are not called to identify as Republican or Democrat or whatever it is. We need to be known by the way we love. That's the thing that should be the marking definitive thing about us, not a political party. But moving right along to the next question. I love that we're talking about this because as young adults, we I don't know about you watching, but I know I feel this pressure oh God, we're not watching our parents navigate this stuff anymore. We're the ones navigating it. And I know oftentimes when we just get in these conversations, the young adults in the room kind of get quiet, and the I love this, the moms and dads in the room in the Wisdom Club, shout out Wisdom Club, the people in the room, they're like, that's right, they get real vocal. But we as young adults are like, oh, I don't know. But that ties into my next question is, how important is it for us as believers to be vocal politically? So is it something where we need to be speaking up and we need to be vocal? Or is it enough to be a believer and have strong beliefs about something, but not feel the need to be very vocal about it? What do y'all think?
See, I love that. That's a great question, Skylar.
Yeah.
I think the ignorance is when we're vocal with no knowledge. I think that's
good.
Dangerous.
Very good.
I can't be vocal on just what I saw in terms of a clip. I can't be vocal just in terms of what I heard people say. I can be vocal when I'm educated. And again, I go back to Paul in Athens, he studied the culture. So I empower young adults, if you're listening, do your research, because what happens is too, because I teach a class at the college on this, it's called Christian Life Issues. And one of the lessons we talk about politics and things of that nature. And one of the things I communicate to them is that sometimes people only know the electoral vote. But they forget Supreme Court.
All the other things.
They forget legislation, which is in context actually on some level more important than
local.
Because it affects laws. And what happens is, in my mind, I don't want to, people want us to be distracted just with the election so that we're not really up to speed and aware of laws they're passing. And they're just passing laws under people's noses.
Literally.
And we're up here talking about this party. And I'm like, well, are you voting? And when we think vote, we only think electoral vote. But you got to understand Supreme Court, because that plays a role.
Gotta get educated.
You got to know legislation and the laws they're trying to pass that affect if you don't have children, but will affect, in terms of, Pastor talked about it a couple weeks ago, how they passed a vote about bathrooms and how, certain people can be in a bathroom. That happened at the legislation level, law. So I say all that to say, the point is, get educated, learn policies, learn even what the parties are about. So now you can be vocal, but be knowledgeable and be educated.
And let me piggyback off that, because this is a moment of accountability for us as young adults. There's so many things as young adults we aren't educated on because we just ride the coattail of our parents.
Man.
Like it's like taxes and politics and all this, even faith for some of us.
Yeah.
We just ride our parents' knowledge, but we got to do better, y'all. We have to step up and learn about all of these different levels of politics, and not just this big one, but we need to do some research, and hold ourselves accountable.
But I'm sorry, we just piggyback.
Yeah, we gotta be real.
TikTok can be your resource.
They don't know what they talk about.
Instagram can't, because you have to understand, based on what you watch, the algorithm now is going to feed you.
Yes.
So if you watch, maybe you're watching a Republican context of, content, it's going to feed you, but you're never learning what the other party, because now your only mindset and information is based on what the algorithm been feeding you.
That's good.
So read books.
Yes.
Do research online. If you know a professor, talk to a professor.
Yes.
Educate yourself. Learn as much. But there's other resources. Hillsdale, PragerU. There's so many different resources that we can go to be educated on this particular topic.
Learn both sides.
Learn both sides.
I gotta write down everything you just said.
Right.
When it comes to those notes, I'm like, man, pray. All right.
Yeah.
I think for me, like, I think we also have to throw in like conviction to this as well when it comes to being vocal. And like you said, it's understanding, but also we have to understand conviction. Because at least for me, my conviction is I want to reach everybody I can for Jesus.
Yeah.
And sometimes the route we go down is I want to reach everybody to be a Democrat, or I want to reach everybody to become a Republican. But I want to make disciples of all nations. So God called me to make disciples. He didn't ask me to make a party.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, my heart is always like, I have a conviction to yet again figure you out, have a conversation with you, but I want to give you Jesus. I want to see if you know Jesus. And then from there, we can start having some conversations when it comes to that stuff. I'm not saying don't be vocal, but there are times where I do have a conviction where I'm like, I'm going to shut my mouth and listen, because I'd rather win the person's soul than win them for a party. So,
yeah, absolutely. But it goes back to what we said, understanding people's story.
Yeah.
Again, understanding what my granny has been through.
Yes.
And when I talk to young adults, because to not understand or get people's history and story is to, neglect their humanity.
Yeah.
And there's always a reason to something.
Yeah.
So instead of us fighting, y'all have heard me say this, Proverbs 4:7, wisdom is the principal thing, and in all you're getting, get understanding.
Yes.
Understand people, understand policies, understand politics, understand it all, so that you can navigate it with the best possible wisdom you can.
But even if you are having if you are having a healthy discussion, one thing I'll do is, like, if I'm about to go down a route with somebody, the first thing I usually say to them is like, so we're about to go down this route. Do we agree we both love each other and we're going to treat each other with respect?
Yeah.
Me and my wife do that when we're about to get into a fight for the marriage. I'm like, hold on, before we get down this route,
good.
let's just establish something.
Yeah.
So before that conversation sometimes happen, why don't you try establishing with that person and understanding, hey, this is what's going to happen. And then when the conversation is done, because it veers so quickly with people, if it starts veering, my thing is like, let's cut it off.
Yeah.
Let's just yet again, and then like, how about we just pray with one another?
Yeah.
And even if you're not a Christian, you're an atheist, you're like whatever. If we pray together, I guarantee you there's going to be a little bit more of a bond at the end of that conversation.
That's good. That's good. All right. Next question. How do we take a stand for our faith within politics?
Knowing the word, though.
Yeah.
I think, as we said on a practical level, knowing politics and educating yourself, knowing the word of God and what the word of God says about these things.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I saw, especially in 2016, 2020, was this defiance and rebellion towards government.
Yes. Yes.
And it was just interesting that we allowed the environment and the tone of the culture to make us now operate in a mindset and a heart that's contrary to the word of God.
Yep.
Because the Bible is clear. Romans 13:1, it says, submit to your governing body, or submit to the government. And it's not, now if the government has you walking in sinful, that's a whole different conversation.
Right.
But like, we are to honor our government, honor our leaders, even if we disagree. But if we understand Bible, we know how to actually sort of navigate the sort of political realm. So my take is know the word of God, know this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's if it's important to God, it's important to me.
Yes.
So if it's in the like, think about this. If God wrote this book, 66 different books, but we put it in one collection, this is from God.
Yeah.
Like of all books in the world, this is it.
Yeah.
If it's in there, I have to have some type of consideration to go, why is this important to God? Why would he put this in here? Of all things he could write, why would this be important to him? So I think, when it comes to like taking a stand in your politics, like first off, just figure out what's important to God.
Yeah.
And I think also too, when government parties take the Bible and they use it as force towards people, I think we do have to call them out and go like, hey, that's not right.
That ain't right.
That's not right. That's not what that context meant. That's not what that verse was meaning. Like even the one you brought up where it's like, submit yourself. Well, if the government's abusing its power, I have a right to speak up.
If it's a sinful
100%.
area, then that's when because in context, the government in terms of America is the people.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We live in a democracy.
Yep.
But the other thing I'll say is like, that's the question, and please hear my heart on this. I ask myself, do people read the Bible?
Yeah.
Like, do they read the Bible? Because it's like we look at politics and we look at the people and we're just like, oh, how can God use and it's like, did you read the Exodus story?
Yeah.
He literally used Pharaoh.
Yeah.
But again, think if Moses didn't operate in politics.
Yeah.
He would have never obeyed God.
That's
and
true.
it was the political voice for the people of God to be like, Pharaoh, let God's people go.
Yeah.
Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. Think about if Daniel didn't.
That's true.
I mean, it was politically in the context of they were ruling a people and then taking God's people and putting them in slavery and then having them read books and trying to renew their mind to a carnal sort of place. But if Daniel, in the midst of carnality, in the midst of sin, in the midst of a wicked leader, stood firm in his faith, understood the word, and was able to lead through, I'm not conforming, you know what I mean? I'm not eating your food per se, so I'm not going to eat what you're telling me. I'm going to eat this thing, but I'm going to honor and lead in the way God has called me. But I'm so in tune with God, I know how to lead.
Yeah,
so
that's real good.
Even Paul spoke up when he was mistreated. He's like, I'm a citizen.
Yes, he did.
And you mistreated me. And they're like, oh no, we did something wrong. But why?
Snap.
Because that was how they abused a policy and a power.
Exactly.
I love that the Bible speaks to these things because we love to leave church and Christianity out of politics, but God felt it was important enough to put it in his word. So we need to feel important enough, like it is important enough to engage. And see the accounts,
like from Genesis to Revelation, it's all there, but we have to not ignore it, but allow that thing to soak in our heart to where we can apply it.
That's good. I have 2 more questions for you guys, but this is something that I'll hear every single time it's time to vote for the president. It's like, well, I don't like either of them. And it's usually that voice too. I don't like either of them. I don't like either of them. I'm not going to vote. Like, both of them are bad, so I'm not going to vote at all. So what would you guys say to the young adult who doesn't like or agree with either presidential candidate, but feels the need to vote?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Whatever y'all take it.
I just feel like we've become so...
you can say it.
I know. I'm trying to...
Say it nice.
We've become know-it-alls, and we've become so opinionated.
Yes.
Because think about it, we do this on a spiritual level in the context of like preaching. Oh, if it ain't my favorite preacher, I ain't listening to it. Or if it ain't my kind of music, I'm checking out in worship. But that's sort of, but it translates into our everyday. Oh, it's not the person that I like it. And it's like, but what if God is wanting you to humble yourself to make a certain impact? You don't miss what God has or wants to use you for because it's not presented in terms of your cup of tea. Because your cup of tea gonna have you like lacking in your relationship with God. So what I'll say is, again, political abstraction. Like, don't fall into that. Look, and we've said it, look at the policies. What are they? And don't just look at the policies they talk about. Like
look into it.
What are all the policies? What are the things that they're looking to do or wanting to do or communicating they're going to do? And just look at the history, though. I think if we look at the history of certain things, we can honestly see a pattern. And if we do that, then we can make sort of an educated decision in terms of who we vote for.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think like people will complain about what's happening in the world, but like you said, they're not willing to do anything about it. And sometimes this is the best way to bring about change. And so if like you don't like both, the one thing I say, like, let's just take like spirituality, all this stuff out of it. Because you're voting for someone to do a job. So who do you think would do the best job? Right. And yet again, that goes back to that policy thing. So like, and also too, remember, you have the right to do it. So if I have the right, if I'm allowed to do this, like this is my God-given right because of it's been given to me, right? And then also too, as well, people will throw in the Bible and they'll be like, well, the disciples but the disciples didn't have a right to vote. It was not an election process. So like now you have the right, if you want to, you have the right to vote. But I'd say like, if you don't like what you're seeing, to not do something, to me is sad.
But this is why Pastor used to say this, and like sometimes we can just say, oh, that's a corny line. But no, I love it because it's legit. Pray, fast, vote. And the reason I say that is every decision we make needs to be through the right heart. Because sometimes we'll perceive things through whatever our experience is. So let's say like I needed somebody to reach my family. I can look at y'all and make a choice and vote who I think based on the perception. Oh, it's got to be Skylar because she's Black. But what if you have a story that will connect with my family, that will bring them to Christ? So I can't look at like, what it looks like or what they say or their personalities. We got to have the sensitivity of the Holy Spirit to really look at the heart or, again, policies.
This has been such a great conversation, and it has left us with some action steps. So our action steps leaving this conversation are get educated on both sides. We don't vote specifically Democrat or Republican. We vote Christian based off of Christian values. So get educated on the policies on both sides. Get in that word, that Bible I'm pointing at. If you listen and you can't see, but PA got a big old Bible. But get in that Bible, see which candidate has the policies that align with the word. And obviously no one yet so far, Lord willing, send us. But usually they're not all lined up, but who has the most biblically founded policies that we can come into agreement with? Do your research, get in the word, pray, fast, vote. And don't just be a young adult who sits on the sidelines. We are now adults. Even though we're young, we're adults. So we can't ride on the coattails of mom and dad forever. We need to step up and take this as a burden for ourselves, because this is the setup for how our future families are going to live. This is the setup for how we are going to live. And we can't just sit and expect everyone to do the work for us anymore. We have got to step up and vote, no matter how uncomfortable.
Mama Skylar.
This is Sister Skylar. This is Sister Skylar. But we got to step up, y'all. So if you feel a nice little bit of conviction, maybe leave a wave in the comment, because I know I do on getting educated and all that stuff. But we love you all so much. We're so grateful that you have tuned in today. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend or family member. If you have any questions about anything discussed, you can DM us on Instagram at Free Chapel Young Adults. Or, you know what, take this conversation to your friends and have some healthy dialogue about this. Again, I love what Pastor Jordan said about sometimes conversations like this can get hard and they can get a little tricky and you immediately want to get defensive. But start off conversations with, our love for each other ain't changing after this. I just wanted to discuss some things with you. Again, talk through it. But yeah, I think that's all. Any last thoughts from you guys on politics?
No, and then the last thing I was saying is don't get mad at your pastors.
Don't be mad.
Like when they're like sharing this thing and they're empowered. Like Pastor Jentezen preached the message, stand up.
Stand up.
And he's not telling you to pick. He's saying stand up for what you know to be true. The only way you know what's true is if you know the truth. Because that truth will set you free.
And stand with your pastors. He also said that. They be going through it. They be going to war spiritually for us. So let's stand up with our pastors. Yeah,
because we be ducking. When they say something, we're like, you right.
No, we stand with our pastors. So. We honor the leadership God has put us under. But again, love you guys. Share this with a friend or family member, and we'll see you for our next episode. Bye.